It just felt gross. I did not love the work I was doing anymore. I didn't know the fancy word of being in congruence and alignment. There are things in me that I do very naturally that I've probably overlooked, and I think most of us have. We really do carry it all with us forward. Just because we're not in the same industry or career doesn't mean it's any less valuable to us or to other people. The first half doesn't define us and shouldn't restrict us from what we can do moving forward.
Welcome to the Old Chicks No Shit podcast for midlife women who are ready to rewrite the rules and create their kick-ass next chapter. I'm Jennifer Arthurton, and each episode we dive into reinvention, resilience, and unapologetic pursuit of your best chapter yet. Because midlife is not the beginning of the end, it's simply a new beginning. Let's dive in. Hey everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Old Chicks No Shit podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Arthurton. Today, we're going to be talking about your second half career and how you find the meaning and purpose that you might have been searching for. So, my guest today is Jackie Brown, who is a career coach who specializes in guiding midlife professionals towards fulfilling careers. Because I think all of us can relate to, we've been cruising along in our career for 10, 15, 20 years. And then we're like, is this it? Is this really what I want to be doing? How do I find a sense of purpose? I want greater impact. How do I feel like more myself? And these are questions that I hear all the time, and I know you hear them too, Jackie. So Thank you, first of all, for doing the work that you do. But I would love to know, what led you into this as your second half career?
Well, thank you for having me, Jennifer. It's an honor to be on the show. So for me, it was actually living through that myself, having a really satisfying career for 30 years as a creative director. And then waking up, it felt like suddenly I did not love the work I was doing anymore. I remember specifically sitting at my desk. I was freelancing at the time, supposed to be working on a client project, and I was looking out on our beautiful pasture. And while the scenery was lovely, the thoughts inside my head were not. I was wondering about my business. I felt like I was a failure because my creative consultancy was tanking. Never mind that it was the pandemic, right? And there were so many businesses failing, especially those like mine who really relied on those in-person interactions to really prospect.
Right.
It was me that was a failure. Other people had pivoted. Why couldn't I? So I really started a journey of what was going on with me. And then that really led to this huge realization that it wasn't just the work that was not satisfying anymore. It was a larger part of me that wasn't satisfied anymore. So that was certainly the start of my journey, was feeling like I was a failure.
Yeah, it's interesting because you brought up the pandemic, and I feel like the pandemic had a lot of people really reevaluating themselves and their lives. And I've heard more people, so many people, talk about that as being the precipitating event that really had them questioning their career. It was almost like a little pattern interrupt for many people. And it was do I really like this? Is this what I want to keep doing? All of this, it's so interesting.
Yes, absolutely. The pandemic,
like it's meant to be.
Right. Certainly with a lot of things that came out of the pandemic, a lot of us were questioning, well, if I'm stuck in this house doing this thing, this work, and I'm not interacting more, there weren't so many distractions really. So then, the work was one of the main things that we were able to do. And I think that really had people questioning, is this really what I want to be doing? Certainly the impacts of the pandemic were a little different, but led me to the same kind of questions overall that I hear from a lot of clients, especially those of us who have been in the same career for 20 or 30 years. There seems to be, and then there's studies and research showing that those of us who do that really tend to identify so closely with that work that it's then hard to see ourselves any other way. So then any change that we might think needs to happen or we feel that itch to do becomes even harder because we haven't had those changes happening throughout our career. Even if we might,
Right.
be promoted or go from job to job, but if we're basically doing the same type of skills, the skills muscles, that part of our brain starts to be less active, but then our wisdom really does kick in. So I encourage my clients to think about the difference between skills versus wisdom when they are looking for something for the second half of their career.
Right. Okay. So much in what you just said that I want to unpack here for a
Right.
second. So I'm just making a note of skills versus wisdom because I want to come back to that. So a couple of interesting things that you said there is like not being able to separate ourselves from our title. And I know, like, for me, that was absolutely the truth. So, when and not just my work title, like, it's all of how I saw myself in my life, right? So when what I call my midlife crisis happened and I found myself divorced, unemployed, an empty nester, bedridden with a stress-related illness, it was as though all of the titles of who I thought I was in the world were literally stripped away from me. So wife, mother, corporate executive, and at the time I was like big into physical fitness. So even that part of my identity was taken away. And
Yeah.
what I was left with was a huge void of like, if I'm not those roles like that I play in the world, then who am I? Right?
Right.
Because we live in a culture that literally defines us, not just who we are, but where our status is in society based
Yeah.
on the roles and especially our job titles. VPs are more
Yeah.
valuable than, you know, analysts, for example.
Right. Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that it's easy for us to look at our roles because we can somehow put performance with that to help gauge if we're doing all right. And it's more
Yes.
Instagrammable too. It's a lot easier to talk about my role as a mother or wife with visuals or stats, for instance. It's a lot harder to tell somebody, I am kindly curious, and then they kind of look at you a little
Right.
strange. So we are, as a society, absolutely look for things that are much easier for us to be able to compare ourselves to, which is, I think, not where we need to be, but it's human nature. We all are looking for our place in the world and in the tribe, so to speak. So it is human nature to see why we might do that, but I really want us to rise above that and look to
Yeah.
deeper understanding of who we are that's not tied to something that is in somebody else's control, basically.
Well,
You
that's
can
the thing.
change those roles overnight. There's a layoff or a merger or, there's a
Yeah.
sudden divorce. So absolutely, those are not in our control as much as we think they are.
Yeah, and that's the truth. I mean, that's the danger in it, right? When you let the world define who you are, the world can also undefine who you are or change who you think you should be.
Yeah.
And without a solid sense of who I am, which was like for me, my biggest realization was like I have no idea who I am if I am not these things. And the other thing that you said is, we are also rewarded from society based on our titles. So financially, with praise, with status, and all of those types of things. So it's easy, like very, very easy to attach our value as a human to the value that the world is exchanging for who we are. If that makes sense?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Yeah, that
Yeah.
makes great, great sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So on your own journey, then, as you are kind of coming to this, like, is this, art director career or creative director career, something that I want? Like, or is this really who I am? Like, how did you begin to navigate that? Like, where did you start to begin answering that question?
Sure. A lot of it was experimentation at first. I thought maybe it would help if I had a corporate job and take the stress out of owning a business. But then I realized that the jobs that were out there, I think I was aging out of advertising, basically. So it was really
Oh,
interesting to go through
right.
that process of, again, feeling like it wasn't something in my control. That I can't help my age and I can't help my experience, but it was something that other people were judging me on.
Mm-hmm.
So what could I do that was on my own terms? I also was looking at how I felt in the advertising and marketing space. And I realized that the work I was doing there, both in terms of the actual creative work and the prospecting work, was not feeling aligned. But at the time, I didn't know the fancy word of being in congruence and alignment. It just felt gross, right? It just felt like
Mm,
I didn't enjoy it anymore and it wasn't right. So I started really looking for things that felt right. And it started with as being as simple as I'm going to go spend time in my flower beds because by
mm,
God, I feel happy there for at least 30
yeah.
minutes. And let's
Yeah.
just start there. So once I
Yeah.
started to recognize those feelings again of, oh, this is what happiness and joy feel like, then how can I bring that into something that I do for work? I was also really intrigued with what parts of me did feel good when I was with my clients. And it was
Mm,
another moment in this journey that really helped me shift my own perspective when I was with a client. We were having lunch together, and long after the taco plates had been cleared at this Mexican restaurant, we were still in this really deep discussion about what a merger she was going through and how that was going to impact her future. I really was listening for, just to help this poor client as we had been wrapping up on our advertising campaigns. At the end of the conversation, she said, Jackie, I really appreciate how much you help me in our conversation. It's more than just the creative work that you do. You help me feel more confident. You help me see different connections and
mm,
perspectives. And then I said, well, thanks, but you've got a ton of friends. I'm sure anybody can help you with that. And then she said something I don't think I'll ever forget. She said, but they don't do it like you do. So something
mm,
that I took for granted that
yeah.
I thought everybody did was something that other people saw value in me. And it was that moment that I realized there are things that I have of value that aren't related to a skill, that aren't related to some new
Mm,
technology that can also shift. There are things in me that I do very naturally that I've probably overlooked, and I think most of us have,
yeah.
these special
Yeah.
things that we bring into the world.
Yeah, that is so true. And just to like echo, your story as well too, is like when I found myself in that place where I was like everything that kept me busy was gone. I'm like, okay, now I need to figure out who I am. The only place I could really go was inside myself. And I would ask myself today, like, what would you like to do today? And whatever the answer came up is what I would do. And a
Yeah.
lot of times that would like lead me to the park across the street from my house. And sometimes I was so physically burnt out, like I couldn't like do much, but I would like go sit under a tree, right? Or, and then it was like, well, you should just try your hand at writing. And it was just kind of like these little things. And I remember when it was like writing came up, I remember thinking like, but I'm not really a writer. Like I do strategy decks. Like that's the extent of my writing. And literally my writing was how Old Chicks Know Shit got started because I started writing about my experience and then I posted it and then it was just like, oh, okay, there's something to this, right? But to your
Yeah.
point, it's literally just about like listening to yourself and like what feels good, right? Like I just
Yes.
tried this thing. How does it feel? Okay, this feels really good. And the
Exactly.
same thing
And
with my career. Same the exact same thing. Was like,
yeah.
what did I love? Yeah, creating things. Yeah. It's cool. It's very
And
cool.
I think the one step that I think some people miss on is what you were doing is trying things. Let's just do a thing and
Mm,
then evaluate how I feel about this thing I just tried. You opened yourself up to the possibilities, and I think that's so key for us to really explore what's happening. reflection and asking ourselves, going inward is very necessary. But
Yeah.
also, that key element is the action that we take as well. There's so much to be gained from doing a thing. And, a lot of times there's that analysis paralysis. But if we can take some
Right.
action and see how we feel about it, that helps give us data about what that thing is. And then it also builds confidence, like I
Yeah.
tried this thing and I didn't like it, but that's okay. I tried something.
Yeah. Yeah. And I learned something from it. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, because one of the other things that I did, and I didn't realize what I was doing at the time, but looking back on it, was after I came out of, my corporate career, I recognized that like all of my friends and peers were in the same boat as me. Like they were all corporate people who thought the same, looked the same, thought about their careers the same way. So I decided to go out and like have coffee with different people, like as many different
Yeah.
people from as many different walks of life as possible. And those conversations, well, when I first started those conversations, it was like, oh, maybe I'm going to find a job in these conversations. But what I started to realize after a while was like, I was having conversations about like their jobs and what they did and how they got there. And it opened up all of these doors of possibility in my mind where I was like, I didn't know there were people out there doing these things and making a living. Like, I just didn't
Right.
know that was a possibility. Right.
Exactly.
But
Exactly.
it really was sometimes like, taking ourselves out of that environment and like
Yes.
seeing what else is possible, right? Because there's so many possibilities that we can't see. We only know what we've experienced.
Yes, yes, absolutely. I applaud you for that. For looking at those possibilities, and moving outside of your current network. I think
Yeah.
that's something that really does scare quite a few people that are in a career for quite a long time. That they've got this very comfortable network. Everything feels, they know the people.
Yeah.
Everything feels very safe. But to step outside of that and start making those new connections is really another level of getting to know who we are and seeing what those possibilities are. Because those people are going to see you very differently, and again, to help reflect back to you what some people who've known you forever might be become blind to, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that is so true because when like we can't, what is it I always say, you can't read the label from inside the jar.
Yep.
Right? So getting outside the jar and then people reflect back to you different aspects of yourself that you didn't even know existed is a great way.
Yeah.
One of the things I have my clients do is create what I call their badass list. So it's this list of like all the things that they've accomplished, like personal, professional, everything, like challenges, that they've overcome, obstacles, all of this. And then like when you see it on paper, it's like all of a sudden it's like, wow, like, holy, I actually really am capable of a whole lot of things, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's great.
Yeah, it's
Yes.
it's so true.
Yeah.
So how, when people are struggling to separate themselves from their title, how do you counsel them to get out of that? Like I know we've kind of touched on some of that, but are there other things that you do with people to help them see themselves outside their job titles?
One of the very first things I do is talk about assessments. So, certainly,
Mm,
personality assessments and vocational assessments are something that a lot of people try on their own. And there's, certainly some value to that, but that's just a piece of the puzzle. But I really look at the Clifton Strength Finder or Clifton Strength as the assessment that I recommend for people to get started with. Those help people see themselves in a different light, and they're the talents that we have that tend to go across a variety of careers and industries and job roles, for instance. But they do highlight some things that we are natural at. So that's a
mm-hmm.
starting point. And then, so the strengths is one of the first things we do. We also take a look at values, and then we take a look at purpose. So these are some really core
Mm,
things that we look at that sometimes people, I think, take for granted. They might think, well, I value my family, of course, but let's get more specific than that. These are table stakes, and let's go beyond the skills that you have. Those are table stakes. let's get more specific. And in that process, they start to learn more about themselves. So it's not necessarily that, hey, now I have a list of values, but it's just the process of it that helps them see themselves in a new light.
Yeah, and you mentioned this earlier around skills and wisdom being very different things. Can you talk a little
Yes.
bit about that?
Yeah, so there's some studies that were done, maybe 20 years ago or so, and there's research that still is refining it about the difference between crystallized intelligence versus fluid intelligence. So, fluid intelligence is the part of our brain that really leans into skills. And again, this is not the academic terms, but just to help us work through it a little bit. It's more about skills, and it's more about coming up with ideas very quickly, and coming up with being able to do puzzles very quickly, for instance. So that is still working, but it's not working as quickly as it used to in our 20s, for instance. Then the part of our brain that's actually getting better is the crystallized intelligence, what I call wisdom. So that is being able to take all of the knowledge that we do have in our brain and use it more broadly. It's like a library full of books, and now the librarian knows exactly where to go to pull the right books together to help solve the problem. So it might take a little longer to solve a problem or to think about strategy, but we have more resources from which to pull. So that wisdom work is absolutely something that again, encourage my clients to at least think about. Their skills, we still certainly want to keep learning new skills and expanding our brains that way. But what if we looked at our wisdom work as a way to really connect with others and help people see the different connections that we've experienced?
Oh, interesting. So our ability to, so if I'm articulating this correctly, so we have this bank of knowledge built up through life experience, like all the
Mhm.
experiences, personal, career, everything.
Yeah.
And now we're just better able to be able to go, oh yeah, that piece of information, and then we just grab that, because that has happens to me a lot. Where sometimes somebody will ask me a question, I'll answer it, and I'll go, I didn't even know I knew that.
Right.
I did
Yes,
not know that was
absolutely.
in there.
Right.
Oh,
Absolutely. Those
interesting.
connections across our whole experience can absolutely get more robust, and it's easier for us to make those connections as we age. So when I read that, it really felt very specific to why I was getting tired of the graphic design, the very specific skills I was using, but more intrigued and fulfilled by these connections and the strategy work that I was doing. So it really helped me see that it's not over yet. There are lots of ways for me to continue to make an impact that aren't related to technology and AI and learning new skills and having to be on top of the latest trends. I was actually getting really tired of all that, and was looking for ways to still feel like I had an impact without feeling like I was a dinosaur, as some people, want to call us, that we might have a few
Yeah.
decades under our belt.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you the question, like, why is it that we, um, you know, after a period of time, we enter this chapter of our life, and all of a sudden we start questioning everything. Like, we start questioning this career that we've been very successful in, has served us well, and now all of a sudden, and I think you just partially answered that, right? Like, there's definitely something going on, but I also feel like, and correct me and tell me if you agree with me. I also feel like there's this innate kind of need to explore different parts of ourselves, right? So I've been using, to your point, like one set of skills to do this thing that I've been very successful at. But now, like, what else is there? Like, what else is there in me to explore? Do you agree? Like, do you see that in your work?
I do. I think there's quite a bit of feeling that there's a sense of accomplishment with this one part that we've done for quite a bit of time. And then as we start to test other things, then I think that does open the door of, well, testing or experimenting with that was kind of fun. Let's see what happens when we test that. And the need to perform again has started to lessen. Once we start to free ourselves from the title trap, is what I call it, then that really does open the door to all kinds of growth. I mean, it's amazing to think about how much more open we are once we stop worrying about, at least as much, what these performances have been like in our roles. So I definitely see people are much more intrigued about trying new things. They just might need some guidance and some support as they move through those itches that they want to scratch.
Right, right. Because I see this I run the Maven Collective, which is the mastermind for women who are reinventing themselves in their lives in midlife. And one of the things that I see often amongst this group of women when they first come in is like they have this longing to do this or to create this thing. And then they will inevitably at some point say, but I'm just an accountant or I'm just a real estate agent, right? Like, and so it's a classic exactly what you were talking about. It's like, well, this is not a possibility for me because I'm defined by insert job title.
Yeah.
Right. And one of the things I love to remind people of, and again, you can tell me if you agree with this, is that everything that you have experienced up to this point of your life, like all of the skills, knowledge, wisdom, everything that you've accumulated up to this point has actually set you up perfectly for where it is you're feeling called to go next. You just can't see it yet. And one day you will look back and you'll be like, oh, yeah, I get why this happened that way, or I had that job, or, things like that.
Yes, absolutely. It's amazing to think about how stuck we can be with feeling like we've invested in this career and that investment is hard to leave behind. But
Right.
absolutely, we really do carry it all with us forward. Just because we're not in the same industry or career doesn't mean it's any less valuable to us or to other people. We're just using the information very differently. So I love that you're helping people to see that there's so much more possibilities than just this one straight path. Let's get a little
Yeah.
squiggly and start exploring.
Yeah. Well, because I also believe that like your dreams and desires are not random. Like they're parts of
Yeah.
you that are wanting to be expressed. And,
Yes.
you have everything that it takes to step into that expression, like to express that part of yourself, which I mean, I find just so beautiful. Like life has
Yeah.
really like set us up for success. It really has.
Yes, absolutely. There are, to your point, I'm really loving that if the universe has given us this thought, then it's out there, for us to
Yeah.
go get. So if we hadn't thought of it, then it's not possible. We might feel like it's going to be hard, but the effort is something that we can put into it. Absolutely. We can, learn along the way and really lean into all that it's going to teach us. And that, I mean, it's just so
Yes.
amazing how much more growth we have out in front of us. I mean, we're in a spot that will most likely indicate that we're going to live to be 90 or 100. We
Right.
are educated. We have lots of resources at our fingertips, most of us here in this podcast audience. So the chances are that we're going to live to 90 or 100 are pretty big. So let's make
Yeah.
that second half really awesome. The first half doesn't define us and shouldn't restrict us from what we can do moving forward.
Yeah. That for me was like a huge impetus to creating a different second chapter for myself. So I had this realization at the age of 50 that I'm like, wow, if I live to be
Yeah.
like 85 or 90, that means I have like 35 or 40 years ahead of me. And it's like
Yeah.
a whole other lifetime.
Yeah.
And I get to define what that looks like because the first half of my life, I didn't actually make a conscious choice. I checked all the boxes of everything I thought I was supposed to be doing, right?
Yep.
Go to a good school, get good marks, get a corporate job, work your way up the ladder. I did all of those things and, stop in there and have a family and live in a nice house, check, 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 check. right? And then I found myself in this place going like, really? Am I happy? Is this what I wanted? Right? And even like,
Yeah.
my career, it was just like, did I choose based on what would make me happy? No, I didn't. I chose based on, oh, it's the next title. Oh, it's a raise. It's, you know what I mean? And those were the
Yeah.
decisions. That was the lens and that the fact that I could actually make choices that were about my own happiness, my own sense of fulfillment, didn't occur to me until I was 50. And then I was like, wow, now I have a whole chapter ahead that I get to live on my terms.
And it's amazing. It's amazing.
Isn't it?
Yes. And at the same time, I wouldn't, caution against, well, why didn't I do this earlier? Because that's what I was thinking. I was like,
Right.
wow. But
Right.
to your point, it all really helps to combine into a full life.
Mm-hmm.
And if we think about, even going back to like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we certainly have to build that identity first.
Right.
That security, the ego part of it, so to speak. That we need to certainly move forward with something to help build some kind of
Yeah.
life, and that financial security and place of being, uh,
Yeah.
place of belonging really does need to come first. But to me, this part that's happening now is just amazing, and I really hope that more people see how awesome it is. It was
Yeah.
messy in the middle there, but oh my gosh, this after is just incredible.
Yeah, because to your earlier point, like the whole sunk cost fallacy, right, is that I've
Yeah,
invested so much in this, right, that I can't leave it behind. When, I mean, and that keeps more of us stuck for longer than it should. Like I know it kept me stuck for longer than I should, right? I had worked really hard to get to where I was. I just going to throw it all away? I mean, and then
yeah,
the universe had other plans for me. But this idea that, we are never meant to be the same person from the beginning to the end of our lives. And like this chapter has served me, but now
yep.
there's something new, right? And looking forward to it with excitement and possibility, as opposed to, oh my goodness, I need to deal with a change, right? That feels uncomfortable.
Yes, yes. And
Yeah,
the
yeah,
change muscle is certainly something that, especially those of us who might have been in a career for a while, the change muscle might have been a little weak. But the more that we can
yeah,
strengthen that now, the more resilient and again confident that we can build ourselves up for the rest of the changes that are going to happen. And we are certainly going to see more changes, physically and emotionally as we move through the second half of our life.
for
But I
sure.
really see that the changes that we do move ourselves through, let's get into that uncomfortable zone. It will be messy here in the middle, but it's the benefits of making these changes are more than just that meaningful fulfillment kind of work that we're doing. It really does help build our confidence and our resilience as well, and
Yes,
a gazillion
yes.
other things we could talk about.
Yeah. How do you define, well, first of all, this sense, and I hear this a lot too, is like wanting to find a sense of meaning and purpose in our work. First of all, how do you define purpose? And then how do you help people figure out, like, okay, what is that purpose for me?
So for me personally, I had felt like purpose was I've got to find this one true calling that I was put on this earth
Mm,
for. And it felt so heavy and really intimidating that I was missing out on something, that I had been given these gifts and I wasn't using them if I didn't find my purpose. But as I started through reading all these, self discovery books and looking at ways to really process what was going on, I came across Dr. Michael Gervais, who's a sports performance psychologist. And he really had a sense of purpose in his purpose work that really hits home with me and has helped my clients as well. So, purpose doesn't have to be this big
mm,
encompassing
yeah.
aspect. It can absolutely be the purpose that gets you out of bed that morning. It can be the purpose for this stage of your life. But it does need to be something that is forward looking and something that is helpful to a greater good, something that's bigger than us.
Right.
And, and then to really help drive it home to how we can do that, then he's got this formula that I love. And again, it's broad strokes, but the way that I've really parsed it down for my client work is that we think about our talents and strengths that we love helping other people with. Like, how do we enjoy interacting with others that we feel like is a talent or a strength of ours? So for me, that's being kindly curious. Kindness is one of my values. And then curiosity or learner is a huge strength of mine. So I love interacting with people, being kind and curious. So then how does that impact other people? So by me doing that, I'm hoping to illuminate their brilliance. So just like that client in the taco restaurant, she said that I helped her feel seen and heard and more confident. So then what's the greater good even beyond that? So by me doing that, then she can then go light up her family, her community, because now she feels more confident.
Yeah.
So it's using our talents and strengths to help others so that they can go do something else. So that's a formula, so to speak, of how we can think about purpose for this stage in our life.
Yeah. Are you familiar with the term generativity at all? It was coined by psychologist Erickson.
No, generativity.
Generativity. So he actually coined generativity as being a stage in human development.
Okay.
Where we come to this chapter of our lives where the first part of our life is really about us and like building our family and taking care of our kids and, our careers and all of that kinds of things. But that we reach this stage of our life where our focus shifts from ourselves to how the impact that we are going to have in the world, like the legacy that we're going to leave, the impact it will have on other people. And when I read that for me, like, was just a bit of a light bulb, because I was like, oh yeah, okay, it's a normal, natural thing, right? Like that
Yes.
we think about in this chapter of our lives, we think about the impact that our life is going to have, like the
Yeah.
legacy that we're going to leave, which again is so beautiful.
Yeah.
And it makes sense why we're all kind of in this stage where we're like questioning, like, why do I want to go do something different? Right. Like,
Yes.
um,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
I, I,
it's
I
so,
can't wait to read more about that. Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah.
yeah, no, it's very telling. And especially when we view it as being like, you know, often we think about what it is that we're giving up or that this no longer serves me. But when we actually see it as a natural part of our human existence on this planet, it feels more inviting
Yeah.
rather than I hate this job, I can't do it anymore. It's like, oh, I'm stepping into this new chapter of my life where I'm supposed to be thinking about the legacy, which is where your definition of purpose, I think, feels beautiful, because our purpose can be anything for a day, a week, a month, or whatever.
Right. And it can absolutely be, some people are like, well, I just don't have the capacity right now to think beyond my family. And that's okay. That's a greater
Yeah.
good, right? Absolutely. So it doesn't mean that we have to go save the whales. It can absolutely mean that we're helping our family, maintain a stronger household, for instance. It's purpose
Yeah.
is absolutely relevant and personal for everybody.
Yeah. In your work, I see you talk about the meaningful mid-career momentum matrix. Um, and you kind of have it in stages here, which we've kind of talked about a little bit, but I would love for you kind of just to walk us through that kind of as a matrix and the process that we would go through.
So absolutely, the first part of it is really looking at who the person is as they come in to work with me, and then we really take a look at and Jennifer. I can't even remember what that is, right?
So it's examine, discover, explore, define, and thrive.
Thank you. Yes.
Oh, no problem.
Okay.
Sorry, I sprung that on you. It caught my eye. I was like, oh, this is interesting.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. So we start by examining. So we definitely take a look at what their situation is right now. What is leading them to come to me in the first place? So are they feeling burned out? Are they feeling bored? And a lot of times burnout is a very generic phrase. So
Mm,
I really want to get their definition of that. What does that mean to them? And, again, that boredom is something that we see quite a bit with somebody who's been in a career for 20 or 30 years. They just keep using those skills thinking that, it's going to get them more meaning.
yeah.
So then we'll start to take a deeper dive into who they are at this stage in their life. We'll take a look at their strengths and their values, and then start to tie that into their purpose. And then we certainly want to take a look at what their circumstances are for this stage. Are they
Mm,
an empty nester? And is finances going to be how important, or what are kind of priorities? Some of the logistical, circumstantial parts of it that really need to come into play for any decisions that they need to make moving forward. And then the explore part is really what you were talking about earlier that you did just so naturally and beautifully.
yeah.
Let's try things now that we know some more information, and let's just test it out. Let's have some moments of play where we really start to explore what some of your inklings might be. Like you talked about your clients. Hey, I want to test this. I want to see what this is like. Then go do it, and then come
Yeah.
back and see how you feel about it, if it was what you thought it was. Go talk to people who are in the space and really get a sense of what their day-to-day life is like, for
Mm,
instance.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I, I also encourage, side projects. I had a client, for instance, who was certain that she needed to change her job when she came to me. But as we moved through even just these first couple of steps, she felt a lot more confident about the job that she had at the moment. She needed the job for security, and she now felt less desperate to change her job because she was able to take on different elements at work that helped her test, okay, what does HR look like? So then she would ask HR
Mm,
for some project or volunteer for some work. I think some people call it job crafting, where you can go in, if possible, and start to look at ways to change your job or to explore outside of your traditional job responsibilities. So things
right.
like that help people test what they had in mind. I mean, there's certainly a huge difference between thinking about a thing and then putting that into action to really
Yeah.
see if that thing is true, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So then the next section, the define part of it, is we start to gather all that data and think about a plan. We define a plan for what is going to be good for them moving forward. And again, it could be a whole variety of things. It doesn't mean we have to burn it all down and pivot 180. It can absolutely mean just making some small changes so that they, again, feel more control over what they are doing and
Mm.
how they're creating positive impact themselves instead of leaving it to somebody else. And then
Yeah. I love.
certainly
Sorry, go ahead.
the last part is, the thrive part of it, and that's really finding ways to continue the support along the way so that they, like you mentioned, there's sometimes new connections and extended networks that need to come into play in order for these new environments to feel like that they are more comfortable as we're making these changes.
Yeah. I love that you broke it down this way because, like something like questioning our career can feel like really big, like
Yeah.
really, and we can feel really stuck. And I think the way that you've kind of broken it down into these steps, right? It's like, and you know, you might spend more time, way more time in the discover phase than you would in the explore or whatever, or more in the explore, right? But it just gives you a trajectory. Like, okay, here's what we're going to do. It's just like a very simple plan. So it doesn't feel quite so overwhelming because for most of us, our career is a huge, huge part of our lives. Like it
Yes.
sucks up more time than just about anything. So pulling that building block out from underneath our foundation can feel really scary. But this, and I wanted to touch on it for for that reason, because it doesn't have to be that way. Like there are various different steps that you could go and you could stay at the discover part for years, right?
Mm-hmm.
but knowing that the end of it, the end goal of it is learning more about myself so that I can orient my world and my career to feel good to me.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And this is the part that I think many of us don't realize is possible, or is possible, that we can actually, and that we deserve to have careers and lives that actually feel good to us. It's not just an obligation. It's not just a should, or, oh, this is just life. Like, we have
Right.
that power within us to be able to
Yes.
shift that. Yeah.
Absolutely. And the part about these different milestones that we explore in this process, to your point there, it really does vary depending on what kind of uh, space the client actually comes into. So some people have already been through other self-development type of programs, and they
Mm-hmm.
might know
Mm-hmm.
themselves very well, but they aren't sure about how to then move forward into exploring different options. And I think that's fun to really see my own creative background come into play as we talk about different
Yeah.
ways to explore things. So that's an area where that creative director still comes through a little bit, and it's fun to brainstorm some of those ideas. Um,
Yeah.
so yes, having these milestones does certainly help people feel like that there can be a process in place, and that this isn't something that is just out of the blue. That there is a way to move forward that doesn't feel quite so daunting and and intimidating for sure. And then to your point about we absolutely deserve, and I think it helps the whole community when we are striving in our best work, that it's the work that
Mm,
comes easy
yeah.
to us. There's been
Yeah.
such um, a sorry, just totally lost my train of thought. But hard work has been really looked at for years as a hallmark
Yeah.
of somebody that is doing well. But I've come at it from, well, let's find your easy work. It doesn't mean you don't put a lot of effort into it, but your
Amen.
easy
Yeah.
work, that's the parts that feel so natural to you, are really where you get to shine and bring those impacts, those positive impacts to other people. So it's kind of fun to talk to people about, you don't have to work hard. There's a difference between, hard work and effort and versus the easy work. It doesn't have to feel
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that because I always define it as like energy renewing activities and energy depleting activities. So when you're
Yes.
aligned with who you are and you're doing the thing, like I in my business now, which I love, I probably work as hard, if not harder, than I did in my corporate job, but that actually fuels me because it's really aligned with who I am as a person and with my skills, as opposed to my corporate job, which literally drained me into the place
Right.
of burnout. Right.
Yes.
So yeah, it's not about hard work. It's about being aligned and being in flow
Absolutely.
with you and your natural abilities.
Yes.
Yeah, I love
Yes.
that. I love that so much. Um, a little while ago, I read, I think it was a study out of, I think it was Cornell University, and it was talking to people towards the end of their lives about regrets and what the top regret was. And the number one regret that came out was people feeling like they hadn't reached their full potential, like they hadn't gone as far as they could go. And I was like, when I read that, I was like, oh my goodness, like I want to leave this life having spent every part of me, like, so there's nothing left. I mean, gosh knows if I'll actually do that or not, but it was just this like longing to be like, I could have, which is, I think the work that you do is helping people find that untapped potentials like so beautifully, right?
Yes, I certainly hope to, and that's something that really drives me forward, is to help people see that there's so much left for them to do. That we've really just scratched the surface for the first half of
Mm.
your life. I mean, my own parents are in their mid and late 70s, and they've just gotten, both of them have gotten their second advanced degrees and are absolutely killing it. So
Oh, I love
there's
that.
they're wonderful examples for this meaningful second half, and that they certainly, and then my clients absolutely inspire me to keep pushing for that and to keep really
Mm.
working in our purpose.
Yeah. Oh, this has been such a great conversation. Thank you for making the time to spend with me today. And where can people find more about you and your work?
Well, thank you, Jennifer. I've really enjoyed the conversation as well. So shiftingsuccess.com is my website. Certainly can send me an email at Jackie, Jackie, at shiftingsuccess.com. And what I'd love to offer your audience is a complimentary values and purpose session. So that could be a time where we jump on a call and do a really fun values exercise and then go through that purpose formula that we talked about earlier so that they can leave with their values and purpose from that session. So if they just send me an email saying that they heard me on your show, then that will get them into the process of getting a values and purpose session. I'm also really active on LinkedIn, so just Google or LinkedIn search Jackie Brown Coach, and I should come up pretty quickly.
Amazing. We will make sure that all of that gets in the show notes so people can find you easily. And to those of you listening, that value session, gold, like absolute gold. Like that is the foundation of everything that you do moving forward. That is the foundation of alignment, right? Is just being, in tune with your values, knowing what they are. Because it's not always an easy question to answer, right? Like, what are my values, right? So going through that process with you will be hugely, hugely helpful. So this has been a great conversation. Thank you, Jackie. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Jennifer. I love the work that you're doing with your show and with your clients. Thank you.
So to those of you listening, if you liked what you heard today, please do us the honor of leaving a rating or a review on this episode. And even better, if you could pass this episode on to a friend, a peer, a family member, or somebody you think could get something out of it, that would be the biggest compliment ever. So until next time. Thanks for listening to the Old Chicks No Shit podcast. If you like what you heard, the greatest compliment you could give us would be to comment below and subscribe. Or better yet, you could share this episode with a friend, a relative, or somebody you think could get something out of it. And remember, midlife is not the beginning of the end. It's simply the beginning of your kick-ass next chapter.